Have you ever felt like you're stuck, like something's holding you back?
Yeah, like you can't quite reach your full potential.
Exactly. For this deep dive, we're going to tackle that feeling head on.
Hmm, sounds interesting.
You guys shared chapter 16 of David R. Hawkins' book, Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender, with us.
Oh, that's a good one.
It is, and our goal is to pull out those key insights, the stuff that can really help you understand how to move forward.
Right, like a shortcut to understanding.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to really dive deep into the benefits that Hawkins talks about when we actually practice letting go.
Right, and what we want to show you is that letting go of negative emotions isn't just some feel-good idea.
Yeah, it's not just about thinking positive, it's more than that.
It's really about a fundamental shift. It's a key to emotional growth, to solving problems where you didn't think solutions were possible.
Ooh, I like that. Finding solutions where they seem impossible.
Yeah, and it can even lead to a total transformation in how you live your life.
Like a whole new way of being.
Oh, exactly. And what's really cool is that, as this chapter shows, this isn't just some abstract theory.
Yeah, there are real-life examples of this stuff working.
Okay, so let's start with this idea of emotional growth.
Okay, emotional growth. What is that, really?
Well, one of the biggest things that stood out to me is that negative emotions aren't just, bad vibes.
Right, they're not just like fleeting feelings.
They really act like anchors, holding you back from your true potential.
Oh, wow, anchors. That's a good analogy.
Yeah, and letting go, it isn't just about feeling better in the moment.
So it's not like putting on a happy face.
No, it's about clearing the way for personal growth and problem solving. It's like shifting from hitting that wall of I can't to suddenly realizing I can.
And not only can you, but you actually want to.
Yeah, and you're happy to do it.
It's like you're removing those limitations you put on yourself.
And the chapter gives this really compelling example of this. It talks about this middle-aged professional guy who had a total block when it came to dancing.
Oh, yeah, the dancing guy. I remember him.
He really wanted to dance. He'd even taken lessons.
So the willpowers are there. He was trying.
But he always felt so stiff and awkward.
Yeah, like he was just going through the motions.
He was, and it just made him feel bad about himself. Like, see, I can't dance.
Like it confirmed his worst fears.
Exactly. Pure effort just wasn't working for him.
No, he was stuck in that I can't mindset.
Totally. Then one night, he's at a party and decides, okay, I'm going to try again.
Putting himself out there.
But this time, he tries something different. He consciously starts letting go of that resistance, that anxiety he always felt on the dance floor.
Like he just surrendered to the moment.
Yeah. And what happens next is wild.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What happened?
It was like a switch flipped inside him. He describes this immediate, profound shift in how he felt, like going from feeling nothing to suddenly experiencing love, joy, even ecstasy.
Wow, the whole spectrum of emotions.
And suddenly, he's not just shuffling around, he's actually dancing, and he's doing it well.
Like he finally unlocked something inside himself.
Exactly. He's having this incredible experience of, wow, I actually can do this.
That feeling of possibility, right? Amazing.
It is, and it gets even deeper. He describes this profound sense of connection with his dance partner, almost like they were merging together.
Like their movements were in sync?
They were. They even had this kind of telepathic communication, anticipating each other's moves.
Whoa, telepathy on the dance floor.
I know. It's like they were meant to dance together, this beautiful, effortless flow.
That's incredible. I bet he went home feeling amazing.
He did. He goes home totally energized. And get this, he starts trying disco dancing.
Disco? That was his biggest fear, right?
It was, and he's watching himself in the mirror, amazed at how free he feels.
That's so cool.
And then, get this, he has this unexpected flashback to a past life where he was a skilled dancer.
Wait, a past life? Wow.
I know, and he even remembers specific instructions from that life.
No.
And he starts experimenting and discovers this internal sense of balance, like a vertical gravitational center.
A vertical gravitational center.
Yeah, and it allows him to spin effortlessly. He said it suddenly gave him this understanding of how Sufi whirling dervishes do their thing.
That's incredible. So this one breakthrough on the dance floor opened up all these other things for him.
It did, and what's really interesting is that this experience, this breakthrough with dancing, starts to break down limitations in other areas of his life, too.
Oh, like a ripple effect.
Exactly. Things he felt stuck in before start to open up rapidly.
It's like once you break free in one area, it creates this momentum.
Yeah, and it wasn't just an internal shift. His friends and family started noticing a real change in him.
They could see the difference.
They could, and their positive feedback just fueled his desire to keep letting go.
It's like it became a positive feedback loop.
It did. And it really shows you how connected our inner world is to our outer experience.
It all ties together.
It does. And this whole story really illustrates this concept of a scale of consciousness that Hawkins talks about.
Okay, the scale of consciousness. Tell me more about that.
So for 50 years, this guy was stuck at a lower emotional level when it came to dancing.
Defined by that belief that he couldn't dance.
Right. And it caused him to avoid it and feel frustrated. Then, in a pretty short time, he goes through this huge shift, moving up through different emotional states to reach a much higher level of awareness.
That's amazing. So letting go helped him move up the scale.
Exactly. And those higher levels, that's where you experience things like spiritual awareness, telepathy, even past life recall.
Like what the dancing guy experienced.
Exactly. And it just underscores how much potential there is for growth when we remove those emotional blocks.
And this isn't just for certain people, right? Anyone can experience this.
That's right. The chapter emphasizes that it doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're a teenager or in your 80s. What matters is how consistently you practice letting go.
So it's not about age, it's about commitment.
Exactly. Anyone at any age can change and grow.
There's always potential.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to talk about the energy aspect too.
Oh, yeah, the energy.
Think about all that negativity we hold on to, all those suppressed emotions. It takes so much energy to keep all that bottled up.
It's exhausting, right?
Totally. So when we release those feelings, all that pent-up energy gets freed up.
It's like a weight's been lifted.
And then that energy becomes available for things that are actually good for you.
Like what kind of things?
Things like being more creative, growing as a person, doing better at work, having more fulfilling relationships.
All those things require energy.
Exactly. And when you're not constantly battling yourself on the inside, you have so much more energy to engage with the world around you.
That makes so much sense.
It does, right. And, it leads us to the next big benefit, problem solving.
Okay, problem solving. We all need help with that.
We do, but the approach here is kind of counterintuitive.
How so?
Because usually when we face a problem, we try to think our way out of it.
Right. We overanalyze everything.
We do. But the letting go method is totally different.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the difference?
Instead of focusing on finding the solution, the idea is to identify and let go of the emotions that are driving the problem.
So you're not trying to fix the problem directly?
Not right away. You're addressing the emotional root of the problem first.
That's really interesting.
Hawkins says that when we surrender to those deeper feelings that are connected to the problem, the solution often just appears.
It just pops up.
Yeah, you don't have to keep searching for it in your head.
The book gives a great example of this. It talks about disagreeing with your partner about which movie to watch.
Oh yeah, I've been there. Happens all the time.
It's just so relatable.
On the surface, it seems like the problem is just that you want to watch different movies.
But there's probably more to it than that.
There usually is. Like, what if the feeling behind wanting to watch a specific movie is actually that you're frustrated because you and your partner haven't had enough quality time together?
Right, so the real desire is connection, not the movie itself.
Exactly. By acknowledging and letting go of that need for connection, you might realize that it doesn't really matter which movie you watch.
What you really want is just to be present with your partner.
Exactly. Or maybe, as the chapter points out, you're pushing for a certain movie because you're actually afraid of intimacy and you're subconsciously trying to avoid a deep conversation.
That's an interesting point.
It is. By letting go of that fear, you open yourself up to a more genuine and fulfilling experience with your partner.
So you might end up having a heartfelt conversation instead of just watching a movie you don't really care about.
Exactly. And this applies to all kinds of decision-making, not just choosing a movie.
So it's a bigger principle.
It is. When we clear away the emotional baggage, the choices we make are more authentic, more in line with what we truly want.
And we're less likely to regret them later.
Because they're not driven by hidden feelings.
Right. It makes you think about all those times you've made a decision and then felt kind of icky about it afterwards.
Maybe it's because you weren't being honest with yourself about the feelings behind the decision.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, try this out. Next time you're stuck on a problem, step back from the mental gymnastics and look inward.
Ask yourself what emotions are tied to this situation.
And then just allow those feelings to be there without judgment, without trying to fix them right away.
The answer might just surprise you.
Okay, so we've covered emotional growth and problem solving. Now let's talk about how letting go can lead to huge changes in your lifestyle.
This is where it gets really exciting.
It does. The chapter points out that a lot of what we do every day, even our attachments, are often rooted in negative emotions.
Negative emotions like fear, anger, guilt, even pride.
Yeah, those are big ones.
And as we start to release those feelings, it's like we naturally shift into a state of courage.
So we become more empowered.
And that's when real change can happen. Even if we keep doing the same things, our motivation for doing them completely changes.
Right, we go from feeling obligated to actually enjoying it.
Exactly. And what's really beautiful is that the more we let go of negativity, the more love we have to give.
Our capacity for love expands.
It does.
Yeah.
And that love starts to show up everywhere.
So our inner world starts to reflect in our outer world.
Totally. We find ourselves drawn to things that are fulfilling, and we spend more time with people we truly care about.
And we generally just feel happier, more at ease.
And other people pick up on that. They respond to us more positively, even strangers.
It's like that inner joy becomes contagious.
It does. And the chapter talks about this idea of tapping into our own inherent power.
Our own power, not power over others.
Right. And it's not about forcing anything. It's about removing the things that are blocking our natural state of happiness.
And it mentions this important point about success. Real success often comes from doing what we love.
Not from what we feel we should be doing.
Exactly.
And the chapter gives some great examples of this. Remember the story of the young woman who loved music?
Oh, yeah, she had that soul-crushing job, right?
She did, but her real passion was playing and composing music.
And she was so good at it.
She was, but she didn't believe in herself.
Until she started letting go of those limitations.
Then her talent really took off. She started performing in public.
And her confidence grew.
It did. She got a chance to record her music professionally.
And then she got to work part-time, which gave her more freedom.
Eventually, she even started her own music distribution business, which became successful nationally and internationally.
All because she followed her passion.
And let go of those I can't beliefs. And her energy, her happiness was just radiating.
Success in other areas just followed naturally.
It did. And there's the example of the middle-aged engineer who always hated poetry, but then suddenly started writing haiku effortlessly.
I remember that one. He even developed automatic writing abilities.
Amazing, right? And then there's the 6-year-old woman who decided to go back to college.
She ended up getting a PhD and becoming a high-level executive.
Talk about a late bloomer.
These are all great examples of how letting go can lead to these massive shifts in life.
Like, things you never thought were possible can suddenly open up.
It's the idea that when we surrender that resistance, those long-standing problems can just resolve themselves. But the chapter does bring up an interesting point. It says that sometimes these big personal changes can be tough for the people around us.
Oh, yeah, because it changes the dynamic.
Right, the balance shifts.
And it makes sense, right? When we let go of those negative emotions, our priorities change. Things we used to do out of fear or obligation might not matter as much anymore.
And that can definitely shake things up in our relationships.
Because the old patterns don't work anymore. And the chapter also talks about how these new levels of consciousness change how we see things.
Like we start to see through the illusions.
Exactly. Things like money, fame, power, they don't seem as important anymore.
We start valuing things like love, cooperation, fulfillment, and a deeper connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Like a spiritual awakening.
Yeah. And we start to rely less on logic and thinking and more on intuition and feelings.
We connect with a different part of ourselves.
And the need for safety and security might not be as strong.
We're more open to exploring and discovering. It's like life just takes on a whole new momentum.
And it's amazing how fast these big changes can happen.
Letting go can really speed things up. Sometimes it happens in minutes, hours, even days.
Which brings us to this really interesting comparison the chapter makes between letting go and psychotherapy.
Okay, letting go versus therapy.
Hawkins suggests that while therapy can be helpful in understanding our deeper patterns, letting go can be a more direct path to growth.
It's like a different route to the same destination.
Yeah. And he even says that letting go can actually help therapy work better.
It can enhance the process.
Right. So therapy focuses on understanding the whys behind our behavior and emotions. It gives you that intellectual clarity.
Which can be valuable.
It is, but actually processing those emotions can take a lot longer in therapy.
It's a slower process.
Letting go, on the other hand, addresses the feeling itself. The what? Right in the moment. You don't have to dig into the past to figure out why you feel that way.
It's more about being present with the feeling.
And Hawkins says that once you release the emotional charge, The why often reveals itself naturally.
Like the answer was there all along.
He uses the example of depression.
Oh yeah, depression. That's a tough one.
You can spend years analyzing the causes, but the real freedom comes from fully experiencing and surrendering to that feeling of hopelessness.
So you don't necessarily need to know why you're depressed to feel better.
Exactly. You can just let go of the feeling itself.
And the goals of therapy and letting go are different too.
How so?
Therapy often aims to make the ego healthier and more functional. But the goal of letting go is to go beyond the ego.
To transcend those limitations.
Exactly. It's about reaching a deeper level of freedom.
And the approaches are different too.
How do you mean?
Therapy tries to change or replace negative thought patterns. Letting go aims to eliminate those patterns completely.
So it's like a complete overhaul versus a renovation.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And there's also the issue of reliance.
Reliance.
With therapy, you often rely on the therapist and their approach.
You're following their guidance.
Letting go, on the other hand, is about self-reliance.
You're taking control of your own healing.
Exactly. And Hawkins points to research that shows that the success of therapy often depends more on the patient's desire to get better and their trust in the therapist than the specific techniques being used.
So the internal factors are crucial.
They are?
And Hawkins argues that letting go naturally addresses those deeper issues that therapy sometimes misses.
It goes to the root of the problem.
And while therapy might aim for a healthy ego that functions well in society, letting go seeks to dissolve the ego completely.
To reveal a more powerful and authentic self.
Hawkins even compares psychotherapy to a horse and buggy and letting go to a spaceship.
That's a powerful image.
It is. It really highlights the difference in speed and effectiveness. And there's this fascinating across-the-board effect that happens with letting go.
Across-the-board effect.
It means that when you surrender to one big negative emotion, other negative feelings that seem unrelated can also diminish.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like in the story about the man who had a lifelong fear of heights.
You just focused on letting go of other things, right?
He did. He wasn't even trying to work on his fear of heights, but it significantly decreased anyway.
That's amazing.
It's like there's this energy that connects all negative emotions, and when you release one, it weakens the hold of the others.
So while therapy tries to manage those negative patterns, letting go tries to dismantle the very foundation of them.
To get to the source of the problem.
And ultimately, the goal of letting go is to eliminate the source of all suffering.
To be free from the things that cause us pain.
And that involves letting go of the ego and all the mechanisms that create suffering.
It's about reaching a state of true peace and liberation.
And the chapter talks about how each of us has a limited capacity for storing negative emotions.
Like a container that can only hold so much.
As we practice surrendering those emotions, we actually empty that container.
So it becomes harder to experience those negative feelings.
Like fear and anger become less intense, maybe even disappear completely.
Imagine living in a state where you barely experience fear or anger.
That sounds pretty blissful.
It does. And the goal of surrender is to reach that state of transcendence.
To go beyond the limitations of the ego.
And Hawkins argues that therapy, by accepting certain levels of negativity as normal, ultimately limits us compared to the potential of complete freedom that comes through letting go.
So it's about going beyond just functioning okay to experiencing true liberation.
That's the invitation here, to explore that possibility.
So for you, the listener, the takeaway from this deep dive into Chapter 16 of Letting Go is this. By understanding and actively practicing the principle of surrendering negative emotions, you have the power to create huge positive changes in your life.
You can change your emotional well-being, your ability to handle challenges, and your overall experience of living.
And the cool thing is that this process can work much faster than you might think.
Sometimes those breakthroughs happen in the blink of an eye.
So here's something to think about. Once one deeply held negative feeling that, if you let go of it, could open up totally new possibilities for you.
Like the guy who suddenly found himself dancing.
What could you suddenly find yourself doing? It's worth exploring.
It definitely is.